Hey guys, this is Wolf of Dimensions coming back at you with a new Godzilla video, and this time it's the evolution of the 90s and Heisei Godzilla. This is actually my favorite next to the 2014 one because just both of them are such a powerhouse to me, and they pulled off the anti-hero or hero element in some places so well that I cared about the creatures themselves. And we move forward, starting this off, in 1985. Now, not much is different from this in 1955 because both are basically new Godzillasaurs that come out and are still more animalistic. But they didn't go through the same trauma, I don't assume, that the original one did. Because, as I've researched, the original Godzilla actually have something similar to PTSD in its reactions to sounds and emotions and even cannon fire and bombs. So, it's more animalistic. It even reacts to the calling of birds and migration patterns. The only difference between this one and 55 is that it's bigger, bulkier, and even more aggressive than 55 ever turned out to be, up even onwards into the series of Showa. Now, that's the basis for how this Godzilla turns out, that aggressive nature. And it's a good thing and a bad thing in this series. Now, we go through Biollante because not much changed. His physical appearance did change, actually. From his dormant time in the volcano had changed his appearance slightly, and he ends up looking more like the Godzilla we would see in the 90s. Now, going to that, 1991. Sometimes the most confusing plotline most people ever look at, but if you pay attention well enough, personally to me, it's very visible. But they go back in time to stop the creation of the second Godzilla that happened in 85. Now, in the presence of doing this, they move the Godzillasaur, and the whole reason for doing this is because they say Godzilla will end up destroying Japan. But this is where Godzilla seems to be more like his Showa series self before they changed it, is that Japan would be the world powerhouse with Godzilla protecting them. Which means that this had a very more anti-hero element to him before the time change. Now as we get to the time change, the Godzillasaur at the bottom of the ocean is revived by modern nuclear weapons. And what this does is it makes him more powerful and even taller than before, reaching the 90 to 100 meter mark, which is very impressive. Now, it's changed his appearance more into more like what we see right there, and that he's a bit slicker than he was in 85 and 89, but still bulky. He's bulkier than any of the other Godzillas, besides the one in 85. Now, we move on with him to 92. He didn't have much development going against Mothra and Natural. All we do know is that its power is way more than the Showa's ever was. Because while the Showa Godzilla in Godzilla vs. Mothra was taken out by two Mothra larvae, he almost won a fight against both of the grown adult Mothra-based creatures, even killing one, Batra. And that's impressive, especially if you look at the feat of the 1964 Godzilla, which was actually a pretty overall impressive monster too. So we learn about his power, his abilities, and how he keeps coming back, and then we go, and it also gains us the ability to see that he has a sixth sense, that he knows where these things are going to be or what's going to happen. And we get to 93, where we learn a major physical thing about Godzilla. We find out that he has a second brain just in his thigh area, and the reason why is to control his lower half. Now, granted, it sounds odd at first, but in the end, if you think about it, it makes sense. The original Godzilla only spanned to 50 meters tall, so it almost makes sense that he doesn't need this. Or if it's never explained, it doesn't matter. My point is the fact that this Godzilla has two brains to function helps with the fact that his size is so big he needs that extra help, which almost makes sense if you really, really think about it. And we find out that there are Godzillasaurs that are plant eaters if you go to Little Godzilla or Baby Godzilla, and that Godzilla can even have a motheristic nature depending on the situation, which gives them more humanity traits in the whole this thing is actually conscious, which is what I like. Then we move on to 94 versus Space Godzilla. We get a real big look into Godzilla's nature and shape in a very parental way. Not like the 68 Godzilla or the 67 Godzilla with his son, but more of a how you'd see an animal or a creature bond with its actual child, and even if they got separated, which is pretty good overall. We also got to look at the amount of energy Godzilla had gained from absorbing Rodan's energy, which is an impressive feat because it didn't change him too much physically, but it made his body stronger, his own inner strength and heat ray stronger, it increased his organs. And what this does is it actually leads to his downfall in 95, because he's absorbed his body in 95, his body burns down because he's just absorbed so much radiation that his body's going on overload. It's like a nuclear reactor. It just melts down and finally explodes. And we also notice that the oxygen destroyer destroys flesh, rips it off, tears it, just turns it into goo or liquid. He and Godzilla Jr. are both able to stand it and not make any major damage, which must mean that his body composition is somewhat stronger than the original Godzilla's skin, and that it must be tougher. And I'll get into the whole toughness of skin later in the Millennium series, and I'm going to split that into parts, by the way. But it's just crazy how this one, he's not more of a hero, but he's more of he knows that he has to do something. And he knows that there are enemies in his territory. It's almost like Japan is his labeled home. Like, if you go into Japan as any other monster in those waters and anything, he will kill you. It's just a guarantee for any monsters that face him. This is his home, it's his territory, and no matter, even if he has fights with people, he's not gonna just destroy his own home. He lives there, and he ends up caring for something, and that leads to Godzilla Jr.